Sandra Dee captured the hearts of millions with her portrayal of the quintessential good girl in Hollywood. Her blonde beauty and innocent smile made her a symbol of 1950s and 1960s American purity, embodying the ideal image of youth in a time of immense cultural shift. On screen, she was the delicate, angelic figure that audiences adored. But behind that wholesome image, a much darker and more painful reality existed. Sandra's life was marred by emotional and physical trauma, much of it stemming from the very people who should have protected her. Hollywood's pressure and manipulation turned her into a commodity, but her struggle was far from glamorous. Beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect persona, Sandra faced betrayal, abuse, and exploitation, which most of her fans were unaware of. Her journey, from the depths of despair to finding her voice, is one of resilience and strength. In this exploration, we will uncover the truth behind the fantasy she was forced to live, exposing the harsh reality that lay just beneath the surface of her public image. So, from her very first breath, Sandra Dee's life was shaped by her mother's desire to create a perfect image. She was born Alexandra Zuck on April 23, 1942, in Bayonne, New Jersey. Her mother believed that for her daughter to succeed, she needed to appear young and appealing to the public. Because of this, her mother lied about her age several times, making her seem much younger to secure modeling jobs and contracts that paid well. These lies became a key part of her identity, a false image that her mother carefully built around her. Instead of growing up like other children, Sandra was kept away from school under fake health reasons. In reality, her mother wanted to isolate her so she could control her completely. Sandra was dressed and groomed like a porcelain doll, always primped and posed for pictures, never allowed to just be a normal kid. She was fed well beyond her age, not because of love, but to make her seem helpless and dependent. She wasn't allowed to develop basic skills or make friends, because her mother wanted her to fit into a specific fantasy world, one where Sandra had no say or freedom. The name Sandra Dee didn't just come from her career. It was a name her mother gave her, a name that created a beautiful illusion, but also a prison she didn't understand until much later. Her early life was marked by manipulation and control, shaping her into a star, but stealing her childhood in the process. Sandra Dee's life took a tragic and painful turn when her mother remarried Eugene Duvin. Instead of gaining a sense of security or stability from the new family arrangement, Sandra found herself thrust into a nightmare. Eugene's inappropriate behavior started from the very beginning, as he did not just move into the household, but shared a bed with Sandra and her mother. Every night, Sandra was forced to sleep between them, a disturbing situation that quickly escalated into physical abuse. What began with boundary violations soon became nightly sexual assaults, with her mother lying just inches away, seemingly unaware, or perhaps pretending not to notice what was happening. The horror of these experiences was compounded by Sandra's mother's refusal to protect her. When Sandra finally mustered the courage to tell her mother what was happening, she was met with rejection, disbelief, and an unwillingness to confront the situation. Her mother's denial of the abuse was, in many ways, even more damaging than the abuse itself. Sandra was left in a terrifying position, living under the same roof as her abuser, still sharing a bed with him, and carrying the burden of a secret too heavy for any child to bear. This betrayal by her mother, someone who was supposed to safeguard her, caused lasting psychological damage that would affect Sandra throughout her life. The trauma and emotional scars shaped her relationships, career choices, and her sense of self in ways that could not easily be undone. Sandra's story is one of unimaginable suffering, not only from the abuse she endured, but also from the devastating betrayal by those who should have loved and protected her. However, even after her childhood abuse ended, the psychological scars continued to affect Sandra Dee deeply. Her experiences of trauma shaped her understanding of love, safety, and her own sense of self in ways that made her life difficult. Lieutenant in later interviews, she talked about how she lived in a confusing emotional world where she both loved and feared her stepfather at the same time. This emotional conflict is common among those who have been abused as children, and it often made it hard for her to feel emotionally stable or trust others fully. She longed for genuine love and acceptance, but the person who was supposed to protect her was the one who hurt her most. Her mother's silence made things even worse. Instead of helping her, her mother's denial created a lie in Sandra's mind that her feelings didn't matter. She was gaslit into believing her pain was made up or exaggerated, which led her to feel ashamed and confused. During her teenage years, she struggled with feelings of guilt and shame that she carried inside her, feeling broken even when she appeared confident to the world. Despite her beauty and fame, she was haunted by feelings of emptiness and distrust. She developed problems like eating disorders and anxiety, and she found it hard to trust anyone. Hollywood, instead of being a place of happiness, became another form of control where her image was exploited, deepening her feelings of being trapped and misunderstood. Inside, Sandra felt torn between being loved and feeling broken, treasured, and yet silenced. She was caught in a constant battle to survive emotionally, fighting silent battles others never saw. But over time, she found the strength within herself to speak out and share her pain, showing her quiet resilience and courage to break free from her inner darkness. From a very young age, Sandra Dee was thrown into the adult world without anyone to guide her or protect her. While most children played on playgrounds and learned simple math, Sandra was working in New York City's modeling industry alone. Her mother, Mary, would leave her in the city, telling her to get to her appointments and auditions by herself, no matter the weather or how she felt inside. Sandra had to ride the subway with strangers, walk through unfamiliar areas, and go into casting rooms full of adults. Even before she reached her teenage years, she had no one to explain what was right or wrong or to comfort her when she was upset. She had to learn to perform, smile, and obey without question. This early independence was not a gift, but a source of fear and confusion. It made her learn how to survive, but not how to enjoy her childhood. After her abusive stepfather died, Sandra hoped her mother might relax her hold, but instead Mary became even more strict and controlling. She took on all the roles of guardian, manager, and protector, leaving Sandra with no chance to be a normal girl. There were no friends, school dances, or sleepovers because Mary was obsessed with Sandra's appearance and success. Instead of helping her find herself, her mother's obsession pushed her further into a mold designed by others. Sandra's childhood was taken from her twice, first through abuse, then through exploitation disguised as a career opportunity. By the time Sandra Dee was just 11 years old, she was earning what most families would consider a lifetime's fortune, $80,000 a year, a staggering figure in the 1950s. But instead of that success being celebrated or used to enrich her life, it became another tool of control in her mother's hands. Mary saw Sandra not as a daughter, but as an asset to be refined, marketed, and maximized. As Sandra's career blossomed and the offers rolled in, Mary fixated on preserving her eternal child appearance. She insisted that Sandra bind her chest tightly every day to prevent any signs of puberty, terrified that natural development would tarnish her marketable innocence. This painful and harmful act wasn't just physically constraining, it was emotionally damaging. It sent a chilling message to Sandra that her worth was conditional, rooted in how little she resembled a grown woman. The trauma didn't stop there. As Sandra's body tried to mature, she was pressured to halt the process through extreme dieting. She began eating less and less until her diet consisted solely of lettuce leaves. No protein, no fat, no balance, just lettuce. This went on for an entire year, resulting in devastating effects on her physical health. Her bones weakened, her energy disappeared, and her development slowed. She didn't experience adolescence as a gradual, natural transition, but as a battleground of self-denial and pain, all to maintain the illusion that she was still the perfect, untouched girl next door. Since all the outside appearances of Sandra Dee seemed flawless, many fans believed she had a perfect life filled with beauty and grace. Hollywood magazines often printed her beauty secrets, which included tips like taking long baths, brushing her hair 100 times, and sitting up straight to maintain perfect posture and poise. She appeared disciplined and elegant, and her glossy hair, porcelain skin, and small figure captivated audiences everywhere. However, what people did not see was the intense internal struggle she faced, which was hidden behind her charming smile. Sandra was obsessed with her grooming and cleanliness, seeking control in a world where she often felt powerless. She worked hard to keep her image intact, but behind the scenes, she was starving herself to maintain her childlike figure. She admitted years later that she often skipped meals and didn't understand nutrition, which led to ongoing fatigue and health issues. Her obsession pushed her into a serious health crisis, and by her late teens, she was diagnosed with anemia. Her hair, once shiny and full, began to thin, and her skin lost its natural glow, becoming dull and dry. Doctors told her her digestive system had almost shut down from years of malnourishment, forcing her to learn how to eat all over again. What started as an effort to control her body and make her happy eventually turned into a dangerous illness that nearly ended her career and affected her life deeply. She wasn't just thin, she was unwell, battling a sickness that many did not see. even as she continued to appear in front of the cameras, still expected to be the cheerful, perfect Sandra Dee. Knowing that as she grew older, Sandra Dee looked back on her childhood and teenage years with a deep sense of pain, especially about her relationship with food, her body image, and her sense of self. She remembered how eager she was to imitate the glamorous women she admired around her, even though she was not emotionally or physically ready for such maturity. She wore clothes meant for older girls, walked confidently on high heels, and always presented a polished appearance to the world. However, inside she still felt like a child, desperately searching for acceptance and approval from others. Sandra recalled feeling a strange sense of pride whenever she noticed that the numbers on the scale were going down, thinking that losing weight meant she was succeeding. Yet, this pride was only temporary, because it soon turned into horror when her body began to protest. When she tried to eat normally again, her stomach reacted badly, causing nausea, dizziness, and pain with every meal. She realized that her dieting had gone beyond healthy weight loss. She had starved her body into dysfunction. Her rebellion against growing up had turned into a self-made prison, where control was an illusion. Sandra deeply regretted how she blindly followed the pressures of an industry that cared more about appearance than her health, and how her mother's influence contributed to her struggles. Her story highlights the dangers of adult expectations placed on children, showing how living for others' approval can lead to long-term physical and emotional damage. Her experience stands as a warning about the high cost paid for external validation and the importance of caring for one's own well-being and identity. Despite the chaos of her professional life and the emotional turmoil of her upbringing, Sandra Dee found refuge in small, quiet pleasures that gave her brief moments of peace and normalcy. She loved playing board games because the rules were simple and the outcome was fair, unlike the unpredictable and sometimes harsh dynamics of her home life. In her quiet moments, she would read fiction, immersing herself in stories that allowed her to escape from her tightly controlled world and imagine a life filled with freedom and adventure. Dance also brought her a fleeting sense of joy, as moving through music allowed her to express herself in ways words could not. It was an outlet for her feelings, a way to feel alive beyond her restrictive environment. She also had a surprising fondness for spicy foods, indulging in bold flavors that contrasted with the bland meals provided at home, seeking excitement in small, flavorful bites. However, these innocent pleasures were never truly hers alone. Her mother's controlling presence was never far away. Mary, her mother, accompanied her everywhere, even to film sets, watching over her like a prison guard. She often interfered in Sandra's decisions, criticizing her openly and undermining her attempts at independence. Any small act of rebellion, like choosing what to eat or how to spend her free time, was met with guilt, scorn, or emotional manipulation. Although she genuinely enjoyed these simple joys, they remained fragile and short-lived, constantly overshadowed by her mother's suffocating grip that refused to loosen its hold. Despite being only 12 years old, Sandra Dee's journey into acting began through a series of lies and careful manipulation. Her mother wanted her to appear older and more mature than her actual age because she believed this would help Sandra secure roles in Hollywood. To achieve this, her mother and the studio crafted a false image of her, presenting her as a girl who was closer to adulthood than she really was. Her first significant role was in the 1957 film Until They Sail, where she played the youngest sister among four, navigating themes of love and war. For this part, the producers wanted her to look more developed and mature. They inserted a rubber suit to simulate an adult woman's body, which was a cruel irony because her mother had suppressed her natural growth in real life. This artificial enhancement was meant to make her appear ready for adult roles, yet it starkly contrasted with her real age and emotional state. Off-screen, Sandra's innocence was evident in her behavior, which mirrored her lack of real-world experience. Growing up in isolation, she was controlled and kept away from normal childhood interactions. This lack of social familiarity made her unaware of boundaries and appropriate behavior when working with adult co-stars. She approached her older colleagues with a naive mix of innocence and excessive affection that could easily be misinterpreted. She was not trying to be provocative. She simply did not understand the complexity of social cues. Her eagerness to impress and her excitement about being in glamorous settings made her overly trusting and eager to connect, but she lacked the awareness to protect herself from possible exploitation or danger. This debut role launched her into stardom, but it also exposed the deep emotional vulnerability caused by a childhood that robbed her of normal, age-appropriate experiences. Her story reflected how her early fame was intertwined with innocence lost, and the emotional gaps of a childhood that was never fully lived. Even as Sandra Dee's fame grew rapidly in the late 1950s and early 1960s, she faced significant personal challenges that many did not see behind her bright smile. Since she had never been taught how to set personal boundaries, she found herself in a confusing and sometimes dangerous situation. The entertainment industry at that time was known for blurring the lines of acceptability, with many older men, including producers, agents, and co-stars, operating in ways that often ignored proper boundaries and consent. Sandra lacked a clear understanding or guidance on how to handle these interactions, leaving her vulnerable to exploitation. Her childhood experiences compounded these issues, as they had included years of sexual abuse from her stepfather and emotional manipulation from her mother. These traumatic experiences distorted her understanding of affection, trust, and physical touch. She had learned to associate approval and closeness with being used or manipulated, which made it difficult for her to distinguish genuine care from exploitation. Because she lacked the language to express her feelings and the confidence to stand up for herself, she often felt powerless. Her innocence, which many praised as part of her charm, was not just a sweet trait, but became a trap that limited her growth. Hollywood's glamorous image masked a hidden world of emotional manipulation that she navigated unprotected. Her naive charm contributed to her being typecast as the good girl, a persona that made it hard for her to break free or evolve. This lack of emotional education and self-awareness made her susceptible not only to predators, but also to feelings of shame and self-doubt. She constantly questioned her own worth, her intentions, and even her memories, which left her emotionally fragile. Walking through an industry filled with superficial beauty and manipulation, Sandra endured much more than the spotlight revealed, shaped largely by her focus on survival rather than choice. Then, in 1960, Sandra Dee's life changed dramatically when she met Bobby Darin on the set of the film Come September. Bobby was a singer, an actor with a big personality. He was charming, confident, and very ambitious, qualities that made him stand out. Unlike Sandra, who was often hesitant and careful with her feelings, Bobby was bold and expressive. He quickly made an impression on her with his lively spirit and strong will. Almost right away, Bobby proposed marriage after just a short time of knowing each other, which surprised everyone, even Sandra. She was unsure at first because she didn't know Bobby well, and her life had always been carefully controlled by her family and others. The idea of making her own choice about her future was both exciting and frightening. Understanding that Sandra's mother was the main person in her life, and the one who made many decisions for her, Bobby decided to win her over with kindness. He showed her respect and flattery, acting politely and with old-fashioned manners. To everyone's surprise, especially Sandra's, her mother approved of Bobby very quickly. Some people think that her mother saw Bobby as another way to control Sandra, another man she could influence by being kind and a little manipulative. Others believe that her mother wanted to pass responsibility for Sandra to someone else. Whatever the reason, Sandra and Bobby went ahead and eloped soon after the film shoot was over. Their marriage was quick and sudden, seen by many as a mixture of rebellion and a desire for independence. It was a move that left those around them stunned, and many wondered how long it would last. For Sandra, this marriage was more than just a quick romantic decision. It was a turning point. Bobby treated her differently than anyone had before, like a grown woman with her own choices, not a child to be controlled. Though their relationship wasn't perfect, it introduced Sandra to new feelings. She saw that it was possible to love someone on her own terms, to make her own decisions about her life and happiness. The experience opened a new chapter for her, one where she began to understand what it meant to have her own agency and to pursue love that belonged only to her. Because Sandra Dee's marriage to Bobby Darin was supposed to be a fairy tale, many believed they had found happiness together. However, as time went on, the truth behind their relationship was much darker. Although they appeared to be the ideal young couple of the 1960s, behind closed doors, their marriage became a toxic environment filled with imbalance and emotional neglect. Sandra was often seen as a pretty face, a decorative presence meant to support Bobby's career and social image. She was expected to attend parties and performances, always smiling and staying silent, even when her feelings were hurt or her needs ignored. Bobby, meanwhile, was caught up in his success, often treating Sandra more like a trophy than a true partner. After his shows and social events, he would frequently leave her alone, disappearing into the company of friends or colleagues, leaving Sandra feeling invisible and unimportant. This emotional distance wearied her, especially given her past experience of childhood control and neglect from her family. She had hoped marriage would bring affection, safety, and understanding, but instead she found herself trapped in a cycle where her feelings were dismissed and her voice was unheard. In her loneliness and despair, Sandra started drinking and gambling, not just out of boredom but also as a way to rebel and get some control over her life. Sometimes she would act out subtly, trying to get Bobby to notice her, to look into her eyes and acknowledge her existence. Her actions came from years of emotional starvation, rooted in a deep need for love that she never truly received. Her marriage, which many saw as a romantic union, was in reality a relationship marked by quiet pain, loneliness, and unspoken suffering. Despite her early fame and charm, Sandra Dee's marriage to Bobby turned into a cycle of emotional distance and cruelty. Over time, their connection deteriorated into hostility and manipulation, replacing honest communication with silent, sharp jabs. Instead of sharing their pain or trying to understand each other, they began to attack each other in small, calculated ways that hurt deeply. Sandra, who was once shy and passive, started to lash out with sarcasm and minor tricks, hoping to provoke a reaction. For example, she told Bobby his toupee was crooked in front of friends, not to humiliate him, but because she desperately wanted him to show some emotion, even anger. Bobby responded with cold indifference and emotional cruelty of his own. He would ignore her for days, flirt with other women, and make hurtful comments that touched her deepest insecurities. Their fights became mind games, creating a toxic push and pull that grew worse after their son Dodd was born. Parenthood did not bring them closer but widened their gap. Bobby accused Sandra of cheating, even questioning if Dodd was really his child. These accusations crushed her, especially since she had always aimed to be the perfect wife and mother. Instead of talking to her directly, Bobby chose to send someone else to tell her their marriage was ending, stripping her of dignity and leaving her with no chance for closure. The breakup was not just a separation but a psychological rupture that made her feel more unlovable and replaceable, fueling her fears and insecurities. After Sandra Dee's divorce became official in 1966, her life entered a difficult period marked by a sharp decline. Her once promising career, which had already been slowly fading over the years, suddenly collapsed almost entirely. Hollywood showed little interest in a young woman who was now 24 years old, no longer fitting the innocent and youthful image that had made her famous. As a single mother with personal problems, she was viewed as a liability and not as marketable as before. Studio executives, obsessed with maintaining a specific public image and focused on sales, turned away from her completely. The industry tried to keep her trapped in the role of the perfect, innocent girl, preventing her from changing or showing her true self. In a rare and bitter interview, Sandra spoke out against the facade she was made to keep, describing how her press agents would hide her cigarettes and replace her drinks with water to make sure she appeared the good girl the industry expected. Behind the scenes, her reality was much darker. She was battling depression, struggling to care for her son alone, and watching her career vanish despite all her efforts. She felt abandoned by Hollywood, the very place that once celebrated her as its shining star. Whenever she tried to reinvent herself, she was only allowed to be Sandra Dee, forever frozen as the picture of teenage innocence, despite her desires to grow and find her own identity. Despite the bitterness and emotional pain of their relationship, Sandra Dee never stopped caring for Bobby Darin. Their love story, however toxic, had moments of genuine connection that she could never forget. Even years after Bobby remarried, he would return to Sandra's life during times of crisis when he needed someone he could trust. He never sought comfort from his second wife or anyone else. Instead, he turned to Sandra because their bond was deeper than just romance. It was an emotional tether that remained strong despite their broken relationship. She was the one he called when he was scared or sick, and their connection stayed alive in those moments of vulnerability. As Bobby's health began to decline due to lifelong complications from rheumatic fever he had battled as a child, Sandra was there for him, offering emotional support and solace. She watched helplessly as the man she had loved and cared for shrank under the weight of his illness. When Bobby died suddenly in 1973 at just 37 years old, Sandra felt an unbearable loss. His death was more than losing a former husband. It was losing someone with whom she had shared her most formative and fragile years. Although their relationship had been difficult and filled with pain, it also contained genuine love, deep history, and lingering regret. The pain of losing him never left her. Her eyes carried a shadow of grief long after the lights faded, a silent mourning that stayed with her for the rest of her life. After Bobby Darin's death in 1973, Sandra Dee's life entered its most difficult and sorrowful phase. Although they had been separated for some time, his passing created a gaping hole in her heart that no one else could fill. Their son, Dodd, later shared that Sandra never truly emotionally recovered from losing Bobby. He had been the one person who saw the real Sandra, not the young girl in films or the image her mother had shaped for her, but the woman who was hurting beneath the surface. Bobby's death left her feeling abandoned and deeply alone. Her career, which had once flourished with leading roles and admiration, slowed down almost to a hey lieutenant. The glamorous image she once held was now mostly remembered in nostalgic stories, and she was offered only small TV appearances instead of the starring parts she used to have. Feeling tired and disillusioned, Sandra chose to step away quietly from the busy world of entertainment. She focused her energy on her son, Dodd, trying to give him the stability and love she had lacked growing up. But even in her new role as a mother, the pain from her past lingered. Her relationship with her mother, who had always been strict and controlling, continued to cast a shadow over her life. This influence affected how she made personal choices and her ability to heal from emotional wounds. Sandra's journey was marked by loss, quiet strength, and the ongoing struggle to find peace amid memories she could never fully escape. Despite her fame and beauty, Sandra Dee's life was deeply affected by her relationship with her mother, Mary. From the start, it was a relationship filled with manipulation, guilt, and emotional abuse. Mary often used her influence to control Sandra's decisions, making her feel responsible for her mother's happiness and well-being. Even when Sandra tried to seek love and acceptance, she rarely found it in her mother's actions or words. As the years passed, Sandra's hope for genuine maternal affection faded, and her wounds grew deeper, leaving her emotionally fragile. In the 1980s, as Mary lay dying, she called Dodd, Sandra's brother, to her side. Instead of offering comfort or sharing kind words, Mary chose to hurt Sandra one last time. She warned Dodd not to waste his life cleaning up after your mother, a cold remark that dismissed Sandra's lifelong struggles and suffering. This cruel statement was aimed not just at Dodd but directly at Sandra, as if to remind her of her failures and her pain. When Dodd told Sandra what his mother had said, it shattered whatever fragile hope she had left. For years, Sandra had endured silence, pain, and attempts to gain some sense of approval from her mother. Yet, in her mother's final moments, she chose to deliver her last, unforgiving blow, which left Sandra emotionally devastated. This betrayal marked a turning point in Sandra's life, pushing her into a dangerous decline. Already vulnerable from years of emotional neglect and distress, she began to retreat from the world around her. Her old habits, which she had used to cope with her pain, resurfaced with force. She drank heavily, often skipping meals for days, and neglected her health completely. Her appearance and spirit started to fade as she withdrew further into herself, refusing to face her pain or the outside world. Her emotional suffering also took a toll on her physical health, making her more prone to illness and exhaustion. The pain of her mother's final betrayal seemed to unravel her entirely, leading her into a darkness from which she struggled to emerge. Her life became a shadow of what it had once been, filled with sorrow, regret, and a longing for peace that seemed forever out of reach. After years of suffering from nutritional deprivation and alcohol abuse, Sandra Dee faced a health collapse that almost ended her life. One day, her son Dodd discovered her vomiting blood, her body weak and failing from years of mistreatment. He was terrified and knew he had to act quickly, so he forced her into medical treatment, a brave move that literally saved her life. Under the care of doctors, Sandra began a slow and very difficult journey toward recovery. She started to gain some weight and slowly reintroduced proper meals into her daily routine, trying to rebuild her strength. For a short time, she even thought about returning to her acting career, holding on to a faint hope of regaining her old life. In those moments, glimpses of Sandra's former charm, her beautiful smile, and her natural grace appeared, reminding everyone of the star she once was. However, the years of abuse had left permanent damage to her body. Doctors diagnosed her with kidney failure, a serious condition that required her to undergo dialysis. The process was tiring and painful, draining the little energy she had left. But she kept trying. She made the effort to show up for interviews and appeared at some events, not as the perfect starlet she once was, but as a woman who had endured a great deal and had survived unimaginable pain. Sandra's journey was difficult, filled with setbacks and small victories, a testament to her resilience and willingness to keep fighting despite her fragile condition. Having faced many struggles throughout her life, Sandra Dee, in her final years, made the courageous decision to stop drinking. This was a powerful act of self-respect, and a way to reclaim control after living much of her life feeling like others were guiding her choices. Despite her efforts to move forward, the damage from her past had already taken a toll on her health. Even as she chose to live quietly and stayed away from the spotlight, those who knew her often described her as still being kind, gracious, and elegant. Although her body was failing her, she carried herself with dignity and kindness. Her life was not filled with bitterness, even though she could have been angry about her hardships. She carried her past with sorrow, but she refused to hate. The emotional scars she endured never wholly healed, but she learned to live with them and maintain her dignity. In 2005, Sandra Dee passed away at the age of 62, a life that was cut short, her body finally giving in after many years of silent suffering. Her death caused many fans and peers to reflect deeply, many of whom had not been aware of the extent of her struggles. To many, she remained forever the bubbly girl from Gidget or the innocent Sandy from A Summer Place, but in truth, her life was a story of quiet resilience and private heartbreak. Although her famous images often showed her bright and cheerful, her final years revealed a woman who endured much more than what was seen on the screen. And as we reflect on Sandra Dee's life and career, it becomes clear that her story is one of contrast and resilience. She was celebrated for her innocent image and widespread popularity, yet behind that facade, she endured significant hardships imposed by the harsh realities of Hollywood and fame. Her beauty and charm captivated audiences, but her experiences reveal the darker side of Hollywood's influence, where young stars often faced exploitation and emotional pain. Despite these struggles, Sandra fought to reclaim her life and her dignity, showing strength and perseverance beyond the camera. Her journey reminds us that behind every image of perfection, there can be a story of resilience and survival. Her life highlights the importance of recognizing the human behind the fame and understanding the challenges many face in the pursuit of success. Ultimately, her story encourages us to see beyond appearances and appreciate the courage it takes to overcome adversity.